Hey guys, Barefoot Millionaire here and former burned out landlord. Because everyone told me that owning rental property generates effortlessly monthly cash flow while I slept. The reality is far more hands on and less profitable than advertised. They forgot to mention the 3 a.m. phone calls about no heats and clogged toilets, and the $8,000 HVAC replacement, and the roof leak, and the tenant who lost their job for the fourth time. Guys, I got into real estate to build wealth, not to babysit tenants and work on property. So when I wasn't building wealth fast enough using the traditional rentals, I wondered, what if I could get paid like a landlord without the hassles of becoming one? And what if I could collect 6 years rent in about a year without managing the tenants in the property? So I set up building wealth in real estate differently. Now I do a hybrid model that's proven to work for me. As you're going to see, over the last 15 years, I've refined this model and it has a track record of profitability far better than traditional rentals with much less headache and time and management needed. That's exactly what the $1 million real estate conveyor does. So, in fact, it's one of the reasons I was finally able to build a profitable rental portfolio because of this method. I'm able to hold the best, flip the rest, and today I'm going to show you exactly how it works. I'm going to show the real math because numbers don't lie, and then the real life example so you can see step by step how I actually do it. How to reduce risk without needing 196 rentals and just 2 deals a month makes me over $1 million. And the steps to create recurring large paydays, plus the small rent checks, and how to avoid tenants, toilets, and turnovers. Because if you want to actually build wealth in real estate without babysitting people and property or becoming a handyman, you want to watch this. Because over 3 decades, I've built businesses across nearly every side of real estate investing. I founded HouseBuyer, the premier We Buy Houses company where I did 4,000 deals. I built a $12 million portfolio. And at the same time, I founded one of the top RIAs in the country where I helped thousands of investors through education and my coaching program. And along the way, I built a hard money lending company. I funded over 800 real estate and small business transactions for 127 million. This gives me a front row seat to see what separates profitable deals from costly mistakes. So, and the reason I'm sharing this isn't to impress you. It's so you know that this model you're going to see comes from decades of real world experience, not theory, not a strategy I tested on a few deals. It's the exact framework that me and my clients use for a solid business foundation to do thousands of real estate transactions without the big overhead of 196 rentals. And you'll see why that number keeps coming up in a bit. So, what's the problem with rentals? Well, it destroys cash flow and lifestyle with the late night emergency calls, the tenant turnovers, the property management fees. So, even if you aren't taking those late night calls, those fees eat into your margins big time. And I've not had much luck with external property management companies doing the right repairs timely, keeping tenants happy, and of course, big government. And then the capital expenditures, one roof, and there goes the whole year's worth of property rent. And of course, you got the vacancies. So, with every new rental property comes more of the same. And then you have an accidental job because you eventually have enough rentals. You're going to need staff, maintenance people, property manager, office space, and payroll. None of those I wanted. None of those I've ever had. Well, if you do, you just built yourself a job, a job. And to make matters worse, I don't know if you've heard of the 50% rule in real estate. It's the operating expenses consume 50% of gross rental income. Most landlords only budget 25%. So that $1,000 monthly cash flow that we were promised is really $500 a month. Here's the screenshot you can take because this wasn't the life I wanted. It's not the road I wanted to go down when I got into real estate. I wanted predictable income without building a property management company or paying one. Not only did I not want any of those management hassles, I literally couldn't afford it. I didn't have the time or bandwidth to deal with any of that. That's what started me looking for another model. I started thinking outside the box. Look, every rental eventually gets sold. Every flip eventually gets sold. So why not combine the best of both worlds, hold the property just long enough, let the buyer become financeable, then sell it for what I call retail plus pricing. I'll explain it in a minute. That became the $1 million real estate conveyor. Instead of long-term buy and hold rentals, I work with home buyers, cycle them through the properties every year, just like a conveyor belt. That's where the name comes from, selling them for slightly better than market value. I call it retail plus because these buyers, as you'll see, they can't get financing right away. They'll pay a little bit more to have the opportunity of becoming a homeowner. So my system attracts the buyers and the sellers, and then I get passive income like a landlord without becoming one while I wait for the buyer to cash me out. So I don't have any agent listing commissions. I don't deal with tenant issues or property repairs. And this works 9 times out of 10, not foolproof. But when it doesn't work, I raise the price on the property because of appreciation and sell the property to a new buyer. So imagine an Amazon conveyor belt. Every month, new boxes go on it. Every month, finished boxes come off. Every day, probably. But that's how this business model works. Month 1, I acquire 2 houses. I'll show you how in a bit. Month 2, 2 more. Month 3, 2 more. Nothing cashes out yet. These buyers, these resident buyers, that's the technical term I use in the paperwork, they need 6 to 12 months, sometimes a little bit more. I'll raise the price if it goes longer than that. But around month 6 to 8, the first house or houses start leaving that conveyor. So you can imagine that the money, the cash profit checks, the paydays coming off the conveyor into your hand, into your wallet, into your bank. Month 9, another 2. Month 10, another 2. And eventually these houses, they're entering in one end of the conveyor while checks are coming out the other end. My average revenue for each property. Here's the numbers. My rentals, I average $700 a month net per property. So $8,400 a year. Now my conveyor property, I still get that. Plus the $60,000 average cash out every year. So look at this, guys, $68,000 versus $8,400 with a traditional rental. Like, this is a no-brainer. And I do this with one part-time assistant. I can easily do 2 to 3 conveyor deals a month. And by the way, she's an independent contractor. Like I said, I've never had an employee, just as a side note. So let's say 2 deals a month, making $68,000. That's $136,000 a month by doing just 2 conveyor deals. And $1.4 million a year. Here's the breakdown. Now this is startling because you can really see it when it's side by side like this. It would take 196 rental property versus my 2 deals a month. Numbers being the same, all things being equal, which they never are in real world, but look, 196 doors to manage versus me closing 2 deals. That right there, guys, I got friends in property management companies. I know the back end behind the curtain of what they're going through to do, 200, 400 doors. Look, he's got, I think, 4 vans fully outfitted with the tools, the gear, everything to rock and roll when a problem happens. The couple different snakes. I don't know, probably $5,000 in equipment or so that he pays for. These are employees. You don't have part-time independent contractors when you've got 200, 400 doors. A lot goes in. He's got an entire warehouse to store all his excess and the paint and the carpet and the vans. And he's got a front office with, I think, 3 girls right now. One to close. It's an operation, right? Versus I've got a lean, mean, profitable machine. I've got one assistant, and she works. She does other stuff. She does my errands. She'll go get gas in my car. She does more than just the properties. But I'm out of my basement in my home office. I'm barefoot 95% of the time. I barely put a shirt on. quite a stark difference. Here, look at it another way, because I've got friends, colleagues, peers that are appreciation-based investors. Mostly actually not in my area. These are mostly down south, Vegas, California, where appreciation is a thing. I wanted to look at it this way. Look, at 3.5% appreciation, that's that 1.6 million. Check this out. Here we go. I would need $46 million to make that yearly income that I'm making in 2 deals a month. So does that make sense? That in order to the equivalent, just like I did over here, when you have the rentals, I'd need 196 rental property, or I'd need a $46 million rental portfolio that would then be throwing off appreciation of $1 million a year. So like, I don't know too many people who could have $46 million. Well, I guess I do know a few people actually, and they are making pretty good value. But that's an operation, guys. That's not me and my assistant. So that's just another way of looking at it. If you're an appreciation-based investor, here's that screenshot you can take. The numbers are staggering for that type of system and operation and work and being on the phone, So when you break it down, there's two ways of making big money in real estate. Look, you can receive large amounts from a small amount of people, or you can receive small amounts from a large amount of people. So my conveyor is the large amount from a small amount of people, right? And rentals, having 200 rentals, you're receiving smaller amounts, but from a larger number of people. But let me ask you, which way do you think is easier to make that money? Like, which has less overhead, less risk, less problems where things are going to fall through the cracks? Obviously, with smaller amounts of people, where you get the larger amounts of money. And that's why the conveyor works. So when you do deals with large amounts of people, you're going to have more risk. You're going to have more people to deal with because you're going to have more headaches. You're going to have more management. That passive income problem of having 196 properties is huge. Here, the scaling risk, massive risk, insurance, slip, trip, and falls, managing all those tenants, the maintenance, like I was mentioning, the trucks, the tools, the theft. One local guy actually got robbed at gunpoint at his storefront for the rent. No joke. Vacancy drag, it's what I call it when it's real world net won't stay perfectly at 700. There's going to be huge fluctuations in market rents and tenants falling off during bad times. And then, of course, the path to get there. When an investor reaches that scale, it's what's called expense creep becomes a real factor. Everything gets more expensive, like advertising and the payroll, doing payroll and having people on the books. It eats up your profit in a huge way. So contrast that, what I'm talking about, what I do, what I've done for 15 years. Once I have this conveyor set up, you can live very well on 1 to 2 deals a month versus 196 rentals. So the velocity of money, you may have heard this term, very important concept. A rental property has velocity of money. You buy it once, you collect it slowly, sell it years later. The velocity of money in a conveyor deal. Buy, sell faster for more. Bank it. Buy again, sell faster for more, and bank it. Just repeat. Money moving faster creates bigger returns, creates what's called a velocity of money. I won't go into it here, but that is a very key concept in real estate. So you can bank it, by the way. I didn't say reinvest. See here. Bank it. Didn't say reinvest because we're not reinvesting in the property. We're not putting any money down on these deals. And selling conveyor houses for Retail Plus is much easier than selling rentals. The houses I buy for my conveyors are typically bigger, nicer than rental properties. And these houses will appeal to a wider retail buyer pool than If you're going to sell a rental, unless you do a rehab after the tenant gets out, you're going to be selling to another landlord, either onesie twosies or your whole portfolio. So because most investors only know flipping and rentals, this is kind of an underground concept. I don't know too many people doing this, and I know a lot of investors. They just never learned this kind of middle of the road strategy where you're not flipping or wholesaling or co-wholesaling, and you're not a landlord. It's like this middle of the road, the best of both worlds. Like I said, many investors just bail out within the first year or two. Who do this, go down this road, because the first year does feel slow. I'm not saying that's a drawback. That's just part of this method. It looks like this. Most people quit because they don't see anything happening for months, and that's normal. You're loading the conveyor, right? You start at one end. You're loading on those houses, one or two or three a year, a month, and then it's just like pushing a flywheel. You push it, nothing. Push it, nothing. And then all of a sudden, checks start arriving every month. And then momentum is invisible until it isn't. Kind of like the velocity of other people's money. This is what we're using. We're using the bank's money, not ours. We're using other people's credit. We're using the sellers, not ours. You don't need credit to do this, guys, or money. And then we're using the resident's buyer credit and money. So this is another velocity that's huge. And you guys know all these terms: other people's money, other people's credit. And then rentals are like planting apple trees. Just an analogy to get this in your head. If you're a visual type of person, you can imagine you wait years and then the harvest every month for the apples, after a lot of years. So my conveyor is more like growing vegetables in your garden. You plant, harvest, plant, harvest, plant, harvest, right? Different crops, same land, just a much faster cash cycle. So it's like compounding. You don't really notice it because it's not, kicking off a lot of money until all of a sudden it is. Albert Einstein says it's the eighth wonder of the world. Those who know about it reap it. Those who don't pay it. Compound interest. They pay the compound interest. So this is like doubling a penny every day for a month. Another just mind-blowing stat. You double 1 penny every day for 30 days, you get over 5.3 million from that single penny. So that's the goal. Predictable monthly cash outs. All right. So here's the recipe, the golden ticket. I've called it the golden ticket because it's just two simple things in this golden ticket: the paperwork and the processes, and then the key people. All right. So the key people: motivated seller who's willing to accept the AD&D method terms that I'll talk about, and a buyer who is close to being able to get a loan, but for reasons can't get financing right now, but he can get fixed. He can fix whatever issues are on his credit, whether that's establishing pay history, job time, removing things from his credit. And I'd like it to happen within 6 to 12 months. It does not always happen that way. But I make it in the buyer's best interest to cash me out as soon as possible by using an extension fee from $2,000 to $10,000. And this is a fee. It's not a credit. He does not get this back if it doesn't work out. But if I choose to extend it, because this isn't a bilateral agreement. If he's doing the right things, if I'm seeing progress, and I'll show you another key person who monitors that progress. If I'm seeing progress, all right, we're working in good faith. He's working on his credit, no problem. So the third person in this scenario is going to be a credit coach and or a loan officer. You need them on your team. This person must be willing to pre-qualify your prospect to let you know if and when they can get financing, and then follow up with them. Make sure that they're on track. Check in with them. The loan officer must be willing to follow up, make sure he's on track, get anything squared away that's outstanding on his credit. And if not, let me know. So it's not like I'm in constant contact either. I kind of make it seem like when I'm reading it here, this is like a management intensive thing. That's not the way this happens. And besides, credit doesn't work like that anyways. You don't just, get a bunch of calls and, a bunch of things happen. These things take time. That's why I give 6 to 12, 14, 18 months sometimes. So that key person right there, either a credit coach or a loan officer or both, has to be on your team, and you want them managing it. I've tried it, and it's like, that's just not my cup of tea. A person could do it. You could do it. It's not investing though. So just have a person who's great at it, loves it, do it for you. And then if the buyer uses a different loan officer, by the way, to get his mortgage, I still send my LO $500 just as a way of saying thanks for pre-qualifying them, following up with them, and then he or she will be able to do more of those for me. So I'm glad to help them out when they do their job. So how does this typically work? Here's a real life example showing the numbers from a typical conveyor deal. The seller called me off my seller attraction system. Her job transferred. She was actually even out of the city at the time we talked, and she was making house payments on 2 places. So one of the she needed to sell fast because she was kind of going behind on payments, or getting near the point where she was like, hey, something's got to give. So on the call with her, I use my Dealmaker diagnostic. It's a form that tracks the important information you need for the 3 Ps, the people, the property, and the problems. And then you're able to document that info in an organized way to show me how, or if and how, to make an offer. Sometimes you just can't do anything with them and you got to apologize or refer them. So in order to do a deal, I offered an AD&D solution, which is assume the deed but not the debt, and she agreed to that. I explained how it worked, and she'd be able to sell her house fast and avoid any missing payments or blowing up her credit in any way. So here's a tip that I wish I would have known sooner. I always verify with them that they're willing to accept that offer that I make right then and there on the phone before going out running around town, wasting time inspecting the property, coming back. Hey, here's what I can do. Here's my offer. No, you need to get a verbal on the phone for at least the minimum of what you're willing to pay based on what they say, based on what you're seeing when you pull it up, comps and a picture of the like Google Maps and things. So get a verbal. Do not go out and inspect without that. So the seller agreed to my offer, so I set a time to go out later that day. There was a key under the mat. The house looked great, just like she said it did. And before I left the property, I put a lockbox on the door with that key in it, so then I could, one, have my home sport team go and inspect it, and then get the buyers in. So the process I'll talk you through may seem like there's a lot of moving parts, and actually there are, right? But with my new property checklist, it's very easy to handle. You just go right down the list, and most important, I can hand this off to my assistant to do a lot of it. So it's a checklist. It's a track to run on. You've got this. And by the way, I've improved this checklist. So every time something didn't work out or I found a new way to do it, I'd put it in the checklist. Now what do I have? A better system, right? So when I do say I, a lot of times it's my assistant doing it because, again, it's so easy just to hand it off to her to do. So when I got back to the home, this is actually what I did. I did send the purchase agreement to the seller, had her sign that, and then I requested her previous title work. So then I could then forward it to my title agent so she could do a search and prepare the title work. And 2 days later, title came back clean. I sent the AD&D paperwork to the seller to allow me to assume the deed, not the debt. I now own the property, not the mortgage. And then I closed on these terms. Seller would make 1 more month. And I love that 1 more month because that allows me to market it. I'm surely going to be able to get someone in, and I don't have any out of pocket, right? I'm not paying any bank yet. And then all the appliances and the riding lawnmower stayed. Now you might be wondering, where do you find these sellers? Well, from my seller attraction system. It runs pretty much on autopilot in the background to these specific property owners who are motivated to sell in the areas I'm buying. And it also pre-screens the suspects from the prospects, so I don't have to deal with tire kickers. And Why would a seller not just list with an agent like everyone else does, it seems like? Well, because the house can't afford it. If there's not enough equity to pay the realtor is going to say, you just can't do this, and they'll refer them to me. Well, the seller doesn't want to deal with the hassles of listings and showings, and that can be a hassle, especially if you're out of town. And the seller was out of state, which makes things a little more difficult. And the seller is falling behind on a mortgage, and this is probably the most common reason. If they need to sell fast, no agent's going to guarantee anything in terms of speed. I don't even know if they're allowed to say, yeah, I can take over payments and sell your house in 7 days, which I did with this case. I say it all the time because I can and do it. So as soon as I got the signed paperwork back from the seller, this was about I think we closed on day 7 or 6. My assistant completed the new house checklist. We sent an email blast to the big buyer list, added the house to our marketing and the website. And then within 5 days, I had 7 people who wanted this house to buy. And 3 buyers were ready to put down this $7,000 to $10,000 NROC, non-refundable option consideration. So I had those 3 buyers complete our application process, and I leave nothing to chance here, guys. I have a 6-page app. I know everything by the end of us talking, or I guess completing the application. And I can all but guarantee that I'm going to get paid. They might not eventually buy the house, but I will get paid. So all things being equal, by the way, I'll always select a resident buyer who is a previous homeowner over a renter, because the mindset between a renter and a homeowner is vastly different. I want a homeowner mindset. I want somebody who's accustomed to mowing the yard, tightening the door handles before they fall off, tightening the hinges before the doors fall off, taking care of the property and handy with some tools and a vacuum, right? So I sent those 3 apps to my loan officer to see which one could get financing the soonest, which one looked best, right? Later that day, she sent back the results, and I chose that one app. I called and I followed up the script, which basically says, look, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to put down $500 deposit to hold that locks in your spot to buy the home while we're preparing the easy home buyer paperwork. And then the mortgage on her property, the one I'm buying, was $52,000. Monthly pity. It's a pity you got to pay it. So that's principal, interest, tax, and insurance, $481. I sold it in, I think we closed in 15 days or so. That's typical. The monthly payments that to me from the buyer is $1,195 with a $7,000 NROC. They don't get that back if they default, guys. That's key there too. And the net to me is $714. Potential cash out profit is $56. 1 year term, 1 year extension fee. Now, I did say potential cash out profit. Now, why would a buyer wait 6 to 12 months? Because if the buyer doesn't have any credit, they're not going to be able to get a traditional loan anyways. They have no other choice. This is a great option. And so they can establish their payment history while they're paying every month and clear up the credit. So most buyers don't know how to do this. They won't take the steps, most of them, if they do. So what if the buyer never qualifies? That's why I said potential cash out. I ain't banking that. I'm not guaranteeing that I'm going to make that money. My loan officer follows up with them regularly to keep them on track. She'll do what she can do, and that's all she can do. But buyers do fall off the wagon, and when it happens, they lose their NROC and the opportunity to buy the house. I put a new buyer in, and typically with appreciation, I'll raise the price of the house and sell it again. Simple as. After a year, that resident buyer was not in a position to buy. And the loan officer said they haven't moved their credit enough to buy within a year and hadn't made any progress, like zero progress of simple things that they could do. So I didn't extend it. I chose not to. The resident buyer lost their 7K NROC, lost the right to buy it, and needed to be out within 60 days. After about 3 months, I had a new resident buyer. Pretty much the same terms, same house. Broom swept. I sold it for $124, $1,400 monthly, $8,000 NROC, $900 a month to me. Potential cash out profit 71. So about 13 months later, the Gomez family qualified for a loan. My net, so this is just a summary, was $11,000 in the monthly payments is what I made. So my loan balance, it was 50-ish, something like that, a little bit of pay down, not much. So the sales price, they bought it for 124, so I made 74, the difference between the mortgage balance and my sales price. And look at there, total profit, 82,000 after closing costs. Guys, and that was in 2 years. But, 2.5 years. Because this one, the first one defaulted. So what if property markets crash and the property values fall? Well, look, I'm not banking on speculation. I'm not a speculator. Speculation on property appreciation to make the investment work is not investing. So I do a deal that'll work whether the markets go up, down, or sideways. I'm not holding the property long enough for a major market shift anyways. In 2 years, not a lot's going to happen, at least in my area. I'll see stuff coming way before it hits my area and then adjust prices accordingly. Prices that I pay for the property and how I sell the property. Never had a problem with that. So I have risk management terms baked into my paperwork. So I have flexibility to maneuver. I can extend the buyer's terms if the market fluctuates, So another question I get is, do I need great credit to do this conveyor method? Absolutely not. I mentioned that earlier. You don't need any credit or money, nor do you have to apply for a bank loan. You'll be assuming the deed, not the debt. And how much money do I actually need? Typically, you don't have any money invested in these properties. The last video I did showed how literally zero money invested in that property. And, technically, if you wanted to calculate it, you made infinite return, because if you don't have anything in it, you make infinite return. I write into my offer to the seller that my payment starts 1 to 3 months after closing. So again, even if the payment is small, I just don't like the idea of making payments. I like to see that infinite sign on my return. And this allows me to get the buyer into the property and start paying before I got to cover the seller's mortgage. Well, how much money do I actually need? Occasionally, when it's a great deal, I will make up some of the seller's back payment to bring it current. If they got a lot of equity in, or if I've got another buyer that's just happened. I already had a buyer lined up. Before I even closed with the seller, I sent them out and looked at it. They called me back from the property, loved it. Well, I made up 2 payments at, it was like $795, $1,400. I collected 10 grand NROC within days from that buyer. So yeah, there's no hard set rules. I'll never come out of pocket. I come out of pocket sometimes. And can beginners do this? Yes, there's a learning curve. As you can see, there's quite a bit of things that need to happen in a systematic way. I teach beginners the complete system and paperwork in my coaching program all the time. Now, about the paperwork, I don't leave anything to chance. After 15 years of doing these deals, I have an ironclad process and paperwork. Anytime there's an issue, I bake that solution into my process. So I don't have any surprises anymore. And I've had my attorneys check and okay all my paperwork, and it's been under the scrutiny of judges in court. Everything upheld. There's nothing that's going to get me into trouble. But I don't want to be a landlord. Exactly, you're not. And this sounds complicated. Well, yeah, I suppose if you're first hearing it. So you find a buyer, you find the seller, you place the buyer and help the buyer qualify and repeat. It kind of is that easy, but there are some steps involved in it. That's why I use a checklist. And whenever I don't use a checklist, I typically forget something and feel like an idiot. So what if the seller's interest rate changes? Because I rarely, again, there's a caveat, I will sometimes, but most times I only do these deals when it's a fixed rate mortgage, because I believe balloons are for clowns, and a balloon is going to come back to bite you eventually. It's like rolling the dice at a casino, and I'm not a gambler. So I typically only do fixed rate mortgages when I acquire these properties from the sellers. And if there is a balloon, I want to know if I've got enough time or money to cover it, right? Because I don't want surprises. Otherwise, I'll pass. Sometimes staying out of a deal is better than having a deal and wishing you were out, right? If the market interest rate goes up to the point where my resident buyer may be affected, I got a couple options. I could buy down the interest rate in exchange for a promissory note for that amount of the buy down, or I could roll that buy down into his loan amount. Well, what if I don't have a buyer's list? Hey, this is fundamental 101 real estate investing. Building a solid cash and credit buyer's list is the lifeblood of quick flip real estate. Your buyer's list, it's a living asset, and the money is in the relationship, not the size. You do not need this mammoth buyer's list. 100 buyers who are your target audience specifically for that type of niche, this conveyor belt deal, is better than 5,000 general people. Buyers looking, maybe they're looking for a beautiful retail and they're qualified, and or they don't have any credit or money and they never will because they got the renter mentality or something like that. No, 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 no. You want a specific niche. I'll show you how to do it. I provide a 14-day buyer's list builder. It has everything you need to attract those motivated buyers in the shortest period of time, and a systematic outreach and consistent follow-up and scalable process. What if you can't find the sellers? Similar to a buyer list, you got to build one, and your buyer's list is only as valuable as what you can sell to them. So you absolutely need a systematic way to find and contact motivated sellers. That's why I mentioned my seller attraction system. It uses guerrilla marketing to find off-market property. So you're not competing with people on the MLS like every other investor is searching for. And there's no cold calling, no paid ads. I've never paid for an ad. And no complicated funnels to set up and things I see. What if I can't find sellers? Well, you're just competing with hundreds of other investors when you look on the MLS. When you find these underground hidden deals, there's very little competition, which means there's more profit per deal. Supply and demand. I even include my exact scripts, by the way, so you can quickly sort prospects from suspects, and the deal maker diagnostic, so you have all the important information on the 3 Ps, and then it helps you create your irresistible offer. So the buyer list builder and seller attraction system are the 2 rails that your lead generation runs on for consistent source of those leads. And what if I can't find sellers? By the end, you'll have an understanding of building a buyer's list, quality contracts, and a solid system for continued billing, and have your first deal marketed. So here's how you can build your machine, because probably now you've realized this isn't just another creative financing strategy. This is like a legit business machine. It's a completely different way of thinking about real estate, which is fine because I'm comfortable with the unconventional. And instead of collecting property, you're actually building your own machine that's designed to create predictable exits on a consistent basis. Predictable freedom, that's what I call it. So you can copy me or work with me to get everything you need. And if you're serious about building your own $1 million real estate conveyor, that's exactly what I help people do. In my one-on-one coaching program, I work directly with you to build every piece of this system, from my application to my closing checklist, A to Z, creating buyer and seller pipeline to structuring your deals and deal reviews to make sure you're getting what you think you are getting. Another set of eyes in my mind on your deal. And then avoiding the mistakes that can stall momentum. So the goal isn't just to understand this concept, it's to help you build a repeatable business that fits your market and your experience level. So if that sounds like you want to take the next step, check out the link below and apply, and we'll talk about where you are today and where you want to go and whether coaching is the right fit. Because once the conveyor is built, the objective isn't chasing the next deal. It's creating a system that keeps producing them. That's where that consistent income and long-term freedom begins. Right, guys? So I love talking about this, helping people make money. And if that's you, click the link below and we'll talk on the next video.